Welcome everyone to part 11 of R.G. Collingwood's The Idea of History. And here we are, starting on page 100. We are in chapter about Kant. Just finished talking about Herder and now Kant's influence. Now, I will begin from the top of page 100 of R.G. Collingwood's The Idea of History. I'm going to have to actually start from the page before so that we can start the section properly. The question is an urgent one because he thinks that a non-historical or stagnant society would be the happiest kind. One in which people lived peaceably in a friendly and easy style, as in the state of nature depicted by Locke, where men order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit within the bounds of the law of nature. A state also of equality, wherein the power and jurisdiction is reciprocal, no one having more than another, because every man has an equal right to punish transgressions of the law of nature, thereby to preserve the innocent and restrain offenders. As Locke freely admits, there are inconveniences in a state of nature arising from the fact that there every man is judge in his own cause, or as Kant puts it, such a state in which all men allow their talents to rust unused is not one that can be regarded as morally desirable, possible though it is, and in many ways attractive. Indeed, neither Locke nor Kant nor I think anyone else of their age regarded the state of nature as only an abstract possibility, still less a downright fiction. Hobbes, when this point was raised, replied the first that the savage people in many places of America, except for the government of small families of the Concord, whereof dependeth on natural lust, have no government at all. And secondly, that in all times kings and persons of sovereign authority are in a state of nature with regard to one another. Locke applies similarly that all sovereign states are mutually in the state of nature. And a perfect example of the state of nature, as understood by these philosophers, is afforded by the life of the early Norwegian colonist of Iceland, as described in the sagas. Kant's question, therefore, is this: since such a state of nature is possible, and is in the main a happy state, though from the point of view of moral and intellectual development a low one, what is the force which drives men to leave it behind and embark on the difficult voyage of progress? To this question, there had hitherto been a choice of two answers. According to the Greco-Roman view, which was revised by the Renaissance and reaffirmed by the Enlightenment, the force was making for progress in human history was human wisdom, human virtue, human merit in general. According to the Christian view, which prevailed from the late Roman Empire to the close of the Middle Ages, it was the providential wisdom and care of God, working in despite of human folly and wickedness. Kant has left both these views so far behind that he never mentions them in either of them. Or never even mentions either of them. His own answer is, this force is nothing less than the evil in human nature, the irrational and immoral elements of pride, ambition, and greed. These evil elements in human nature make the continuance of a stagnant and peaceful society impossible. They give rise to the antagonism between man and man, and a conflict between two motives that sway each man's conduct. One, a social motive, desire for a peaceful and friendly life. The other, an antisocial motive, a desire to domineer and exploit his neighbors. The resulting discontent with his own position in life, whatever that position may be, is the spring which drives man to overthrow the social system in which he lives. And this restlessness is the means which nature uses to bring about the advancement of human life. This discontent is not divine discontent, which refuses to acquiesce in the existing state of things because it cannot satisfy the moral demands of a good will. It is not the discontent of the philanthropist or reformer of society. It is a purely selfish discontent which, in the view of the happiness of a stagnant life, is not even based on an enlightened view of the individual's own advantage. To quote Kant, man desires concord, but nature knows better what is good for his species, not observe, for man as an individual, nor even for man corporately as a society or historical totality, but man corporately as a species or a biological abstraction. She desires discord. That's going back to the other thing. For his species, she desires discord. Man wants to live easy and content, but nature compels him to leave ease and inactive contentment behind and throw himself into toils and labors in order that these may drive him to use his wits in discovery of means to arise above them. Nature, that is to say, does not care for human happiness. She has implanted in man's propensities to sacrifice his own happiness and destroy that of others. In following these propensities blindly, he is making himself a tool of nature in her plan, which is certainly not his, for the moral and intellectual advancement of his species. Kant here is wholeheartedly adopting the view that a pessimistic view, if you like to call it that the spectacle of human history is in the main a spectacle of human folly, ambition, greed, and wickedness, and that anyone who goes to it for examples of wisdom and virtue will be disappointed. This point of view in Voltaire's Candide, as against the Leibnizian confidence that all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds, but he raised this view to the level of a philosophical doctrine by arguing that if history is the process in which man becomes rational, he cannot be rational at the beginning of it. Therefore, the force which serving as the mainspring of the process cannot be human reason, but must be the opposite of reason. That is passion. I love that. This is kind of what we've been discussing in the chat recently. Sorry to break from the audiobook. Intellectual ignorance and moral baseness. Here, again, the Kantian theory of history is an application of the Kantian ethics, according to which inclination, desire, and passion is the opposite of reason or the goodwill, and is therefore in itself evil, the force against which the good has to fight. This doctrine is not unworthy of its great author. It is inspiring and stimulating, like Herder's, and far more clearly thought out. Yet, it is not well-founded. It is based on rhetorical pessimism about folly, wickedness, and misery that have characterized the past history of man. This is not a just or sane view of the facts. At the times in the past about which anything is known, there have been occasions when men were wise enough to think successfully what they had to think, and good enough to do efficiently what they had to do, and happy enough to find life not only tolerable, but attractive. And if anybody objects, occasions, yes, but how few? My answer is more numerous at any rate than those of the opposite kind. For otherwise, all of human life long ago would have disappeared. The consequences of this exaggerated gloom about the past are seen in Kant's exaggerated hopes for the future. In the last section of his essay, he looks forward to a time when man shall have become rational, when the blind forces of evil, which have hitherto driven him along the path of progress, shall have been conquered. There will be then a reign of peace, when the problem of working out a sound and reasonable political system shall have been solved and a political millennium achieved through the creation of a rational system of both national and international relations. He half realizes that human affairs in a millennium like this is a contradiction in terms. But yet, the prediction is no mere excrescence on his doctrine. It is a logical consequence of it, an exaggerated optimism on one side balancing due to the exaggerated pessimism on the other. This exaggerated division of history into a wholly irrational past and wholly rational future is the legacy which Kant inherits from the Enlightenment. A profound knowledge of history would have taught him that a profounder knowledge of history would have taught him has taught him that What has brought progress about has not been the sheer ignorance or sheer badness, but the concrete actuality of human effort itself, with its good and its bad elements commingled. Despite, uh, in spite of his exaggerations, Kant has made a great contribution to historical thought. At the end of his essays, he outlines a program for a kind of historical inquiry which he says has not yet been undertaken. He modestly adds he could not himself he could not be he modestly adds could not be undertaken by one so little learned in history as himself. A universal history which shall show how human race has gradually become more and more rational and therefore more and more free, a history of the self-development of the spirit of man. Such a task, he says, will need two qualifications: historical learning and a philosophical head. Mere scholarship will not do it, and mere philosophy will not do it. The two must be combined in a new form of thought, owing something to both of them. Similarly, Vico, at the beginning of the century, demanded what he described as a union of philology and philosophy, a scholarly attention in detail to detail, and a philosophical attention to the principles. I think we may say that in the next 100 years, a serious and sustained attempt was made, certainly not always successful, to carry out Kant's program, and to consider history as a process by which the spirit of man has come to the fuller and fuller development of its original potentialities. Kant's idea, as he calls it, may be summarized in 4 points. 1. Universal history. Universal history is a feasible idea, but demands a union of historical and philosophical thought. The facts must be understood as well as narrated, seen from within and not only from without. 2. It presupposes a plan, i.e., exhibits a progress or shows something as coming progressively into being. 3. That which is thus coming into existence is human rationality, i.e., intelligence, moral freedom. And 4. The means by which it is being brought into existence is human irrationality, i.e., passion, ignorance, selfishness. I will summarize my criticisms of Kant in a few brief comments on these points. The essence of these comments is that throughout, as in other parts of his philosophical work, he has drawn his antithesis too rigidly. 1a. Universal history and particular history. The antithesis is too rigid. If universal history means a history of everything that has happened, it is impossible. If particular history means a particular study which does not involve a definite conception of nature and significance of history as a whole, that too is impossible. Particular history is only the name for history itself in its detail. Universal history is only the name for the historian's conception of history as such. 1b. Historical thought and philosophical thought, again, the antithesis is too rigid. The union of the two, which Kant desiderates, is just historical thought itself. Seeing these events it describes is not mere observed phenomena, but from within. 2a. All history certainly shows progress, i.e., it is the development of something. But to call this progress a plan of nature, as Kant does, is to use mythological language. 2b. The goal of this progress is not, as Kant thought, in the future. History terminates not in the future, but in the present. The historian's task is to show how the present has come into existence. He cannot show how the future will have come into existence, for he does not know what the future will be. 3. That which is coming into existence is certainly human rationality, but this does not mean that the disappearance of human irrationality. Once more, the antithesis is too rigid. 4. Passion and ignorance have certainly done their work, and an important work, in past history, but they have never been mere passion and mere ignorance. They have rather been a blind and blundering will for good and a dim and deluded wisdom. Subsection 4. Schiller. The most direct follower of Kant in the theory of history as history of art was the poet Schiller. He was a keen and gifted thinker. In philosophy, a brilliant amateur rather than a persevering worker like Kant. But he had the advantage of Kant in being himself a poet of distinction, and for some time, when he occupied the chair of history at Jena, a professor historian. Consequently, just as he reinterprets Kant's philosophy of art by bringing to it the experience of a working poet, he interprets Kant's philosophy of history by bringing to it the experience of a working historian. It is very interesting to see in his inaugural lecture given at Jena in 1789 how his experience enables him to overcome certain errors in Kant's theory. The lecture is entitled The Nature and Value of Universal History. Was heißt und sehr welchem End studiert man universal Gesteig? I need to get better at my German. Schiller follows Kant in advocating the study of universal history and recognizes that it requires a philosophical mind as well as a historical scholarship. He paints a lively picture of the contrast between the Brotgellert or daily bread scholar, the professional researcher with his dry as dust attitude towards the bare facts, which are the dry bones of history, a man whose ambition is to become as narrow a specialist as possible, and go on knowing more and more about less and less. And the philosophical historian who takes all history for his province and makes his business to see the connections between the facts and detect the large-scale rhythms of the historical process. The philosophical historian achieves these results by entering sympathetically into the actions which he describes. Unlike the scientist who studies nature, he does not stand over against the facts as mere objects for cognition. On the contrary, he throws himself into them and feels them imaginatively as experiences of is really the historical method of the Romantic school, what Schiller is doing, in effect, is to agree with Kant as to the need for a philosophical as opposed to a merely scholarly attitude towards history, and to maintain that this philosophical attitude is nothing less than the Romanticist attitude, which, for sympathy, becomes an integral element in historical knowledge, the element which enables the historian to get inside the facts which he is studying. Universal history, so conceived, is the history of progress from savage beginnings to modern civilization. So far, Schiller agrees with Kant, but with two important differences. 1. Whereas Kant places the goal of progress in a future millennium, Schiller places it in the present, and asserts the ultimate aim of the universal history is to show how the present, with such things as modern language, modern law, modern social institutions, modern clothing, and so forth, came to be what it is. Here, Schiller definitely improves on Kant, owing no doubt to his actual experience in historical work, which has shown him that history throws no light on the future and that the historical series cannot be extrapolated beyond the present. 2. Whereas Kant restricts the task of history to the study of political evolution, Schiller includes it in the history of art, of religion, of economics, and so forth. And here he improves again on his predecessor. Subsection 5. Fichte. Another pupil of Kant who developed his ideas on history in the fertile manner was Fichte, who published his Berlin lectures on the characteristics of the present age in 1806. Fichte agrees with Schiller and disagrees with Kant in conceiving the present as the focal point which the lines of historical development converge. Consequently, for him, the fundamental task of the historian is to understand the period of history in which he lives. Every period of history has a particular character of its own, penetrating into every detail of its life. And the task Fichte sets himself in these lectures is to analyze the peculiar character of his own age, to show what its central features are and how the others are derived from them. He puts this by saying that every age is a concrete embodiment of a single idea or concept, and accepting what he does, and accepting as he does the Kantian doctrine that history as a whole is the unfolding of a plan. the development of something akin to the plot of drama. He holds that the fundamental ideas or concepts of various successive ages form a sequence, which, because it is a sequence of concepts, is a logical sequence. One concept leading necessarily to the next. Thus, Fichte's history of the logical structure of the concept serves him as a clue to the periodizing of history. Every concept, he thinks, has a logical structure involving three phases: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Hegel didn't come up with that, even though he gets attributed with that a lot. It's not in the book. The concept is first embodied in a pure and abstract form, or abstract form. Then it generates its own opposite and realizes itself in the shape of an antithesis between itself and its opposite. Then the antithesis is overcome by the negation of the opposite. Now the fundamental concept of history, here Fichte again follows Kant, is rational freedom. And freedom, like any concept, must develop through these necessary stages. Hence, the beginning of history is an age in which rational freedom is exemplified in an absolutely simple or immediate shape without any opposition. Here, freedom exists in the form of blind instinct. Interesting. Freedom to do what one likes, and the society in which is the concrete embodiment of this concept is the state of nature. Primitive society, where there is no government, no authority, but only people doing, as so far as their conditions permit, what seems good to them. According to the general principles of Fichte's philosophy, however, a freedom of this crude immediate can only develop into a more genuine freedom by generating its own opposite. So, by logical necessity, there arises a second stage in which freedom of the individual freely limits itself by the creation of an authority over against itself. The authority of a ruler imposing upon him laws not of his own making. This is the period of authoritarian government, where freedom itself seems to have disappeared, but has not really disappeared. It has developed into a new stage in which it has created its own opposite. The ruler, as Hobbes showed, is freely created by the common act of the people, who thus voluntarily becomes his subject. To quote Zizek, who quotes, I think, Lacan, the king is not a king because he is a king. The king is a king because the people think he's a king. In order to become the freedom of a new and better type, i.e., what's become Rousseau would call civil freedom, as distinct from natural freedom. But Hobbes was wrong in thinking that the process of growth of freedom ends here. The opposition must be canceled by a third stage, a revolutionary stage in which authority is rejected and destroyed, not because it is a misused authority, but simply because it is authority. The subject has to come to feel that he can do without authority and take the work of the government into his own hands, so as to be both subject and sovereign at once. It is therefore not authority that is destroyed. What is destroyed is merely the external relation between authority and that which authorized authority is exercised. Revolution is not anarchy. It is the seizure of governments by the subjects. Henceforth, this distinction between the governing and the governed still exists as a real distinction, but it is a distinction without a difference. The same persons governed are the same persons governing. But Fichte does not stop here. He does not identify his own age with the age of revolution. He thinks that his contemporaries have got beyond that. Conception of the individual as possessing within himself an authority over himself is, in its first and crudest form, a revolutionary idea. But this concept, too, must generate its own opposite, namely the idea of objective reality, a self-existing body of truth, which is the criterion of thought and the guide of conduct. This stage of development is science, where objective truth is that which stands over and against the thought, where acting rightly means acting in conformity with scientific knowledge. The scientific frame of mind, as it were, is counter-revolutionary. We can destroy human tyrants, but we cannot destroy the facts. Things are what they are, and their consequences will be what they will be. And if we flout the laws of man, we cannot flout the laws of nature. But once more, the antagonism between mind and nature can be and must be overcome. And its overcoming is the rise in new kind of rational freedom, the freedom of art, where mind and nature are reunited. Mind recognizing in its nature its own counterpart and related to it not by the way of obedience, but by the way of sympathy and love. The agent identifies himself with that for whose sake he acts, and thus achieves the highest degree of his freedom. This Fichte regards as the characteristic feature of his own age, the free devotion of the individual to an end which, though objective, he regards as his own end. The chief difficulty which a reader finds in dealing with Fichte's view of history is the difficulty of being patient with what appears so silly. In particular, there seems to be two especially flagrant errors at work in his mind. One, the idea that the present state of the world is perfect, a complete and final achievement of all of history that has been working towards to bring it about. And two, the idea that historical succession of ages can be determined a priori by reference to an abstract and logical considerations. I think it can be shown that, in spite of their apparent silliness, there is some truth to both of these ideas. One, the historian, and for that matter, the philosopher, is not God, looking at the world from above and outside. He is a man, and a man in his own time and place. He looks at the past from the point of view of the present. He looks at the other countries and civilizations from the point of view of his own. This point of view is valid only for him and for the people situated like him. But for him, it is valid. He must stand firm in it, because it is the only one accessible to him. And unless he has a point of view, he can see nothing at all. For example, the judgment passed on the achievements of the Middle Ages will necessarily differ according to the historian, as the historian is a man of the 18th, 19th, or 20th century. We in the 20th century know how the things in the 18th centuries and 19th centuries looked at these things, and we know what their views are, but not the views that we can share. We call them historical errors, and we can show the reasons for rejecting them. We can easily conceive the work of medieval history as being done better than it was done in the 18th century, but we cannot conceive it as being done better than it is in our own times, because if we had a clear idea of how it could be done better, we should be in the position to do it better, and this better way of doing it would be an accomplished fact. The present is our own activities. We are carrying out these activities as well as we know how, and consequently, from the point of view of the present, there must always be a coincidence between what is and what ought to be, the actual and the ideal. The Greeks were trying to be Greeks. Middle Ages were trying to be medieval. The aim of every age is to be itself, and thus the present is always perfect in the sense that it always succeeds in being what it is trying to be. This does not imply that the historical process has nothing more to do. It only implies that, so far, it has done exactly what it meant to do, and we cannot tell what it's going to do next. 2. The idea of constructing history a priori seems very foolish, but Fichte here was following up Kant's discovery that in all knowledge, whatever kind, there are a priori elements. In every field of knowledge, there are certain fundamental concepts or categories corresponding to them as certain fundamental principles or axioms, which belong to the form of or structure of that type of knowledge and are derived, according to the Kantian philosophy, not from the empirical subject matter, but from the point of view of the knower. Now in history, the general conditions of knowledge are derived from the fundamental principle that the knower is placed in the present, and from the point of view of the present is looking into the past. The first axiom of the institution for history, to adopt Kant's terminology, is that every historical event is situated somewhere in a past time. This is not a generalization empirically discovered by historians in the course of his inquiry. It is an a priori condition of historical knowledge. But according to the Kantian doctrine of schematism of the categories, time relations are schemata or factual representations of conceptual relations. Thus, the time relation of before and after is a schema of the conceptual relation of logical antecedent and the logical consequent. The whole world of events and time is thus schematized into representation of the world as of logical or conceptual relations. Fichte's attempt to detect a conceptual scheme underlying this temporal suggestion or succession of historical periods is thus a perfectly legitimate application to history of the Kantian doctrine of the schematism of categories. Now we are up to page 110 of the idea of R.G. Collingwood's The Idea of History. I'll check out the chat now. We can discuss. If you are listening to the audiobook, you'll either have to wait a week or you can skip to the next one. Okay, so how's everybody doing? Oh, Hacker, yeah. I only practice singing in the morning and playing guitar. Basically, I just live stream what I like doing because I want to share my joy with people. You know, I know some other people enjoy this type of stuff too, so I kind of, let's vibe together, man. Let's this it's like let's take it into like square and joy, pretty much. Let's cube some joy. Let's take it to the fourth power. Let's get even more people in here loving this shit. I feel that, bro. It is hard to concentrate some days. Dude, like there are times like when I start like messing up when I'm reading, it's because like I have a hard time looking at the words. My eyes start just jumping around the page, and I'm trying my best to just keep going. And I apologize for my flub ups. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't read the comments. Yeah, Ken's asked what I was reading. I was reading R.G. Collingwood's The Idea of History, a philosophical work about history itself. Not about like the history of a people, but what is history? What do we know of it? How did the idea of history develop? We went through the Greek Roman conception of history, through the medieval conception of history, and now right now we are past Descartes' Enlightenment kind of period, more into the Kantian Romanticist period of history, with the idea of history being a lot more closer to our modern understanding. Agreed. Philosophy is for everyone, but not everybody enjoys it. I can see when people's eyes glaze over. Books are for nerds, and I think I am a nerd at this point. No. And agreed, high honor. But yeah, that was today's reading. I think it's very interesting that Fichte's view is very similar to my own, or at least at present, with my own thoughts and developments. So as much as I love Kant's idea, or discussion of a priori thoughts, I feel like a lot of times philosophers come up with a concept and then run with it, and they just apply it to everything. Dialectical materialism is a good one. Marx just kind of just like, oh, fucking throw this at everything. Marx is a lot smarter than I am, but still, he did kind of run too far with, not too far. He applied some stuff everywhere that like it doesn't necessarily fit. At least from my. So I've gotten a new way of kind of thinking lately. I don't want to. When I encounter something that I'm curious about and I'm having a hard time understanding the concept, instead of saying, I just don't understand this, or why do people do this? I don't understand that. I'm trying to use the phrase, I don't see the logic in it. Because a lot of times I do understand why people do stuff, like, you're emotionally reacting because of this, whatever. But I don't see the logic in why this thing is happening. So I'm going to use that a lot more because I feel like that's more of what's actually happening. I can understand stuff on like on a gut level, but that doesn't mean I can intellectualize it. And most of my life I spend trying to intellectualize stuff because it helps me kind of figure out life. I have a hard time living irrationally, although I'm trying to a little bit more, trying to kind of be more tuned with my emotions. Make a new trend. I would love to make a new trend. I would love to make it a trend of empathy and sympathy. I would like people to, I don't know. I see. I think it's like I also don't believe in trends really because I don't believe in copying people for just the sake of copying, which is most of what trends are. Like if I like on YouTube and stuff and YouTube Shorts, I see people like just use my sound on your stuff. It's like, dude, stop begging for people to use your sound. First of all, secondly, um, when people just kind of lip sync to stuff, you are. It's like it's like a burger made of styrofoam. Yeah, it's there. There's no substance to it. There's no point of, no one should eat that because you're not going to get any nutrition for it, and there's nothing new that's been created. It's just a freaking styrofoam hamburger. Anyways, yeah, the Ghibli trend. It's very it's there seems to be a human nature. So the I don't always like quite quoting the Bible, but the Bible talks about Jesus talks about in Matthew, I believe. Wait, let me go get my Bible. A little bit easier to look through because the print isn't so small. But in Matthew, I have a lot of books. I'm not a Christian. I just have a lot of different books. Um, or is that Matthew or is that no? It's Matthew. Find it. That'd be but Jesus is walking around through the marketplace and he sees people kind of. He's like, oh man, they're basically like it's like children. It's like watching children. Um, he's like saying that we played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We made all this cool stuff for you. You didn't care about it. But it's like yeah, it's cool. It's like when a kid like a 2-year-old is like watch me and like they keep on bothering you like come on dad and like finally oh fuck okay what watch this and they jump like 2 inches. That's great, buddy. I'm glad that you did that. Good for you. But it's you didn't really do anything, honestly. Oh, you just wanted attention. I'm glad. Here you go. Here's a little bit of attention though. That's what most of I've seen online. It's just people that are desperate for attention, and instead of creating something from themselves or expressing themselves, they take what they see other people getting attention for, and then they try to do that as a way to get attention rather than put something new into the world or something useful. Or even really trying to be genuine. They're not even trying to be genuine at this point. They are. And also, but this is my perception. This is my perception of what I'm seeing. I can't. Obviously, this is not what is. This is how I see it. But from what I see, there's lots of like the whole. That's why I don't get TikTok, because I don't imitate shit. I like to sing songs and practice stuff, but like I'm not trying to do trends. I'm not trying to copy everybody else because everybody's doing it. I like to do stuff because I like it, not because everyone else is doing it. That's why I don't like trends. They don't. You're not doing it because you actually. It's not something that's part of you. It's something that's kind of. It's a monkey see, monkey do thing, and I don't know. It's just not my vibe. But anyways, I digress. Oh, you're a Buddhist? That's pretty dope. Yeah, Buddhism is a very very interesting philosophy. I really enjoy learning about Buddhism. It's very very fascinating how Buddhism has kind of interwoven itself in many different religions. I really like was it Tibetan Buddhism because it's kind of a merger of the traditional Bon religion and the Buddhist ideas. It gives it a lot more fun stuff. I love the magic of Tibetan Buddhism. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is fascinating, fascinating read, and I also listen to it too. The essential, from what I remember in the book, is basically after you die, you're gonna see a bunch of weird stuff in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You're gonna see a bunch of weird things happen, and you're just not supposed to react, because if you do react emotionally or at all, those things will pull you into their own realm. Like eventually, at some point, you'll see the gods, and they'll be like, "Oh, come to heaven, come with us." Yeah, but you're not supposed to, because if you do, yeah, you can go to heaven maybe for a little bit. Then you get stuck in samsara again. You have to go through the cycle of birth and rebirth. Um, then they turn into demons, like they turn to their opposites, and they threaten you. If you don't come with us, we're gonna send you to hell and everything. And you just still ignore them, and you just ignore everything, and then eventually nothing happens, and you're stuck in nothingness for a bit, and you gotta wait through that. And then eventually, if I remember correctly, it you achieve, if you can do that, you can. I think it's the rainbow body, but I think the rainbow body is supposed to be achieved in the physical realm. But basically, you break through the cycle of rebirth, and you basically become Buddha. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I listened to it, but I would say that we're so cooked if that's gonna happen from all the dopamine from doom scrolling. So yeah, that's another thing as well. I too get sucked into doom scrolling, and I often justify for myself. It's like, oh, I'm just looking through, I'm looking at guitar stuff. And no, I'm still just doom scrolling. So that's actually a great question, Ryan. What would life be in digital form in itself? What would that look like? And so, do you mean, hey, what up, Abdul Rahman? How are you doing? Salam alaikum. What would digital life? What do you think about AI? Do you think that humans can create general intelligence? Not even AI. Like, let's go beyond that. Like, can we create general intelligence through the use of mechanical processes? Because to me, it feels like that should be possible if we are looking at our own consciousness from the point of view of it being a chemical process that happens. Define general intelligence. Let me look up the definition of general intelligence really quick, so that way we're going for good terms. Um, okay, that's an article. That's not a definition. So in wait, let me look up. I was getting a different type of definition that was more based on other stuff. Artificial general intelligence. Okay, so here's from IBM. Um, Artificial general intelligence (AGI) is the hypothetical stage in the development of machine learning in which artificial intelligence (AI) system can match or exceed the cognitive abilities of human beings across any task. It represents the fundamental abstract goal of AI developers or development, the artificial replication of human intelligence in a machine or software. So that's what I mean. So actually, that's another good point. Do you think that at some point we're actually going to abandon digital um, computation, digital computers? I think that at some point, agreed with Abdullah Rahman. I see a lack of intelligence in current AI era. Agreed. But do you think that with advances in biology, that we will start creating our own organic computations, organic computers, which I think would call in some kind of ethical questions, because if my phone is run on some sort of organism that I created, doesn't that mean I'm enslaving life itself for some menial task? But I feel like this type of technology is going to be limited for probably the next couple hundred years. This is what we're going to go for a little bit, but I think we're going to abandon it at some point, because I feel like it doesn't have, it plateaus too quickly. Way too quickly for the amount of size, the amount of information that we can do. Like, you can store so much information in DNA versus a freaking computer chip. Yes, maybe we'll be able to do nanotechnology at some point, but even then, why not just apply that to biological systems and use biological systems for computation and programming rather than just electricity, which runs on battery charge and a bunch of other things. Don't be able to create things with free will. Life is made. Ryan says life is made of mathematics, and we can find the right mathematics. You can just put that into digital form, and it will breathe. See, I totally understand that point of view. I think about that quite a lot, especially in the looking at life from the perspective of it being inevitable. I think that because of the infinite recursion of the universe, constantly expanding and then going back, and then Big Bang, Big Crunch, and it's destroying itself and then rebirthing itself. It might not be necessarily consequential that, or in like the next universe won't necessarily be a direct copy of this one with only one small change, but at some point there will be another universe just like this, or another time when the universe is just like this with only some slight differences. And so I think that that life itself is just a property that happens in the universe. So that means that potentially we could do the same with technology, with the manipulation of elements itself. How is it that the universe exists, one Big Bang after another? That it's just it's one idea that so we have to that it presupposes two ideas. First of all, that there was a Big Bang, that the universe started from a single point and expanded rapidly. Two, that there will be a big crunch. That eventually, once the universe expands to a certain point, it'll collapse in on itself. It'll implode. The explosion and implosion of the universe are assumptions in my conception of the universe. So these are obviously very big assumptions that influence the course of my thinking, but those are the assumptions that I start with. Agreed. I think I can assume as about what your beliefs might be, but at the same time, that's why I love discussing with other people, because we all have different points of view, and I don't necessarily want to assume. I would love to hear your ideas as well. Whether or not the universe is infinite, or whether or not it was created from a single being, I still love discussing these ideas because it expands our minds in ways of being able to think around these problems. Hell yeah. Salam alaikum, brother. I like that. Ryan says, universe arises out of the paradox of non-potentiality containing potentiality. See, this is something I've been thinking about recently is, well, so let's even just think about what is causality. Aristotle talks about the idea of a prime mover, that after a certain amount, we can go back and back, all the beginning of the universe. Well, something has to create the universe. Well, something has to create that something. Then you have an infinite recursion at that point. At some point, you have to stop and be like, here's the first guy. Here's the prime mover of the universe. Possibly. At least in his theory. But even that first person, or that first being that is the prime mover, that assumes a causality is a principal part of the universe, of everything, is that there can be a boom, a nothing, and then a something. And I don't know if that's true or not, because that's impossible to really truly experience. But that's why, but also at the same time, how can we even conceive of an eternity, of something that always was, is, and will be, because it is both inside and outside of time. It is time itself. Time itself is like a block rather than something than water flowing. It is the channel that the water flows through. But I digress. But with the idea of a causality, if you can have a causality, you can have miracles. You can have a God that creates something. But if you don't have a causality, everything is merely consequential. Everything is super deterministic. You can only have free will if you accept a causality, as well as, well, I guess you could, if you can accept a causality, you don't necessarily need the metaphysics afterwards to explain free will. But I feel like it's more, I feel like it follows that if you take a causality, you will get a metaphysical being at some point. A being that is not necessarily one that is bound to the physics of the universe. Well, I guess that in itself, that is, yeah. It couldn't be a physical being that has a metaphysical software, I guess you could say. But even then, we still don't have any proof of that, and that's still a presupposition. I need to go back to reading the chat. Agree. High Honor says that will create an infinite loop. Correct. Ryan, a beginning is an idea we like because it is what our universe looks like to us. I like that. That does not mean it is the only way it has to work. It means maybe it has been there eternally. I like that idea, Ryan. Abdullah, I'm just going to call you Abdul because it's hard to pronounce your full name. We are depending on our concepts of things to explain these topics. Yes, agreed. There must be something that breaks this chain of causes, a being that does not follow the rule of causality. I like that. Ryan, time seems to move forward because of information integration tends to increase entropy globally and increase complexity, which creates the illusion of moving forward. But even then, that's like, so that is a description of what's happening, but still doesn't really, for me, it doesn't explain the necessary reason of why. Because I was thinking about this last night when I was trying to sleep. I'm going to have to get ready to get going soon, but if we are beings of time and if we truly have consciousness of time and we are metaphysical beings, if we were like that, why would we be bound to the flow of time? Why free will itself would be not the ability to choose between decisions, but the free movement of consciousness through the block of space-time, essentially going into the future and past, even though everything would be the present. You'd be able to modulate whether or not I'm right now, or if I could go back 5 hours. That would be true free will. I could go back 5 hours, take a different path through. I could make different choices. To me, that's what free will would really be. But that is not what we experience. So, to me, that denotes that we don't actually have control, and all we have is a observer phenomenon. We don't necessarily have a will. We are spectators. Parts of a spectator that's kind of viewing itself. I don't know. I have a very weird philosophy because of my own experiences, and I have a hard time explaining it because it's just, yeah, you had to have been there, man. Ryan says, I honor, but if we think that there's beginning, does there have to be an end? Yeah. Ryan says, why? To you get to answer that right here now. We make meaning to find out why. Sorry, I lost track of what we were talking about 5 seconds ago. Hello, Black Gamer Rose, or Gamer Black Rose. Ryan, you are a pocket of the universe that purposely forgot itself. Agreed. Agreed, brother. Ryan, or High Honor. If we think there is a beginning, that means there is a start and there must be an end. Is everything going to end sometime? Nothing is going on. No time, no universe, no nothing. See, that's the thing. I don't know. See, the idea of a beginning and an end is a human concept because of the beginning, because of the idea of birth and death for us. We conceive of things as having a beginning and end, but in reality, if so, let's look at things from a Taoist perspective. There is no beginning and end. Things merely transform from one thing to another. The beginning and end is the point at which we take from starting to observe, and then we no longer observe that thing. That there is no beginning and end. There's only the points of which we are observing something. Everything is constantly in flow from one thing to another. In philosophy, this is called the idea of becoming. That things are going from, if I remember correctly, in Hegel's view, if I remember correctly, nothingness is trying to. Things are going from nothingness into being. You can never achieve being. We are always becoming something. If I remember correctly. I feel like I'm butchering this. High Honor, if we think there's a beginning and end, that means there's a start. Okay, so I just read the same thing. I thought there was a new chat. It just moved. But yeah. So that's kind of the concept that I've been mulling over recently. But yeah, I'm glad that y'all came around for the reading. Had a lot of fun. And anybody else got any little things, any gems they want to throw in before I end the stream? Zeph. Okay. Yes, I keep on forgetting. Zephyr. Okay. Mr. West Wind. Oh no, wait, is that the North Wind? I think Zephyr was the North Wind. I thought. I can't remember. But anyways, yeah, Zeph. I'm gonna have to peace out because I only have a few minutes before. Oh, West. It's the West Wind. Thank you. I'm gonna have to peace out. It's been lovely talking with y'all. This is like some of my favorite time of the day when I get to discuss philosophy with my homies over here. And yeah. Oh, so yeah. Before you go, if you guys want to keep on discussing this type of stuff and you want to like get with like-minded type of people, or not necessarily like-minded, even maybe just people that aren't like-minded, but you want to discuss this stuff, one of my posts on the community thing in YouTube, I have a Discord server called Self Educators Book Club. I'd like to see more people in there because I would like to be able to talk even off, stream. I'm sorry, bro. But it's a good thing you're learning this stuff so early on. You're pretty smart for a 13-year-old. At least you're asking questions, and that's what's important. I hope you have a wonderful day, Ryan, Zephyr, Abdul Rahman. Abdul Rahman. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Salam alaikum, to my Islamic brothers. And have a blessed day for everyone. Spread some love, spread some joy, and have some compassion today. Peace.